Hi, my name is Ryan Leone. I'm the author of a book called Wasting Talent. They're making a movie out of it right now, and there's also going to be a documentary that's coming out in 2020 called Idiot Savant, The Savage Life of Ryan Leone. And I just started uploading content, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. I spent a lot of time in prison, and when I was in prison, people always would like hearing stories from me. I don't know, I guess people just think that I tell good stories about my years as a drug addict, and I have a lot of them. I uploaded one a couple weeks ago, and people seem to be responsive to it. So I said I'd upload more. I want to definitely thank Al Prophet for opening the door for me. I know I got a lot of people from his channel coming and watching my stuff. I've been doing work with him, and he's an amazing talent. He's at AmericanDope.com, and Al Prophet has an amazing channel with great content. So go check that out. But I'm going to tell you a story about when I was probably right before I was 21. I was going to rehabs all the time, and I went to this one down in Orange County, and I got caught fucking a girl in the shower, and they kicked me out. And I think it was like the third rehab within the span of maybe like a month or two that I had been kicked out of for that kind of stuff. And so my parents let me move back in with them in Santa Barbara, and I immediately started doing heroin again. And I was doing really bad. And this is back in, I think, like 2005. MySpace was still around, and I got a message from this girl named Liz, who I had gone to wilderness camps when I was like an out of control teenager. My parents sent me away to these wilderness camps, and I met her, and she's like a little kind of like raver kind of girl, like colored pink hair back when we were 15, and I met her, but I never heard from her again until she sent me a message on MySpace, and she basically told me she had a crush on me, and that she'd always wanted to track me down and kind of see where I was and what was going on with me. And I told her I was a heroin addict, and she was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She just had a baby. She had like a 6-month-old baby, I think, and the guy she had the kid with had run out on her. And she told me she had a 2-bedroom out in Albuquerque, and that her roommate was going to be going to Europe for the summer. So I told her I was strung out. I mean, like back then, I don't know, I was doing a gram or two a day, like $100 habit, and my life was going nowhere. I was just kind of like stealing money and being a piece of shit drug addict in Santa Barbara, and my parents had pretty much exhausted their resources or their willingness to send me to rehabs. So when she gave me the offer to go to Albuquerque, she basically said I could come live there and that she would take care of me, and she was really flirtatious and made it seem like I was going to go out there and basically be with her. And I didn't have any other options really. I mean, my parents were just at that point where they were going to kick me out. So my dad got me a train ticket to Albuquerque, and the plan was I'd gone and gotten Suboxone. Suboxone is a opioid blocker. It has naloxone in it, and it has buprenorphine. So the buprenorphine stimulates your opiate receptors, but it also makes it so that you can't feel opiates, and it helps you transition. So a lot of people use it as a maintenance drug. Back then, it was big in Europe before 2003, 2004, and somewhere around then the FDA had approved it. I remember I was like one of the first people in California to even be on Suboxone. No one knew what it was. Back then it was little octagon-shaped orange pills that you'd have to take sublingually and have them dissolve under your mouth or under your tongue. No one even knew what they were. Now they're really, I think they're like one of the most common drugs at the farm. I'm still on them to this day, and now they're in these little strips, but back then they were pretty uncommon. So my dad hooked me up with the doctor, and the plan was they were going to send me my medication once a month, and I'd go out there, I'd transition off heroin onto Suboxone, I'd be with Liz, and she was going to take care of me, and in exchange I'd help with her kid because her boyfriend had moved out on her or whatever. So I get on the train, and that morning I think my dad gave me like $200, and he's like, make this last. I'm not going to send you money for a while. And so I called my best friend and I asked him to bring me some heroin, like a gram or something. I don't remember what it was, but he was supposed to bring me something. And so I get on the train, and I'm calling him like with a flip phone and blowing him up, and I'm sick. Where are you? He ends up showing up on a bicycle to the train station, and I'm literally sitting on the train, and I see him, and the train starts taking off, and I can't score. And I remember I had like a anxiety attack over it. I was tripping because I knew I was going to be really sick. I'm sitting next to this preppy guy on the train, and I didn't say anything about being sick, but I think he just like intuitively knew it. And he's preppy. He didn't look like a drug addict. And he says, "Are you sick?" And I say, "Yeah." And he's like, "You want to get well?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he pulled out like a gram of heroin. And he's like, "I sell heroin." He's like, "I'm actually going down to Orange." I was up in Santa Barbara. He's like, "I'm going down to Orange County by the train to pick up a couple pieces." Piece of heroin is 25 grams. So like that's like I guess what an ounce would be in California and some of the neighboring states. It's because of the metric system, because in all the heroin's coming from Mexico, so it's in 25 grams. That's how they quantify that unit. So instead of a 28 gram ounce, it's a 25 gram piece. He was going down to get a couple pieces, and he wanted me to come with him to Orange County. He's like, "Why don't you just come with me?" After I got well, and I told him that, I basically told him on my story. I was like, "Look, I'm out of options, and I'm going to Albuquerque to be with this girl." So he told me that we were going to do a layover in LA, and he's like, "You should pick up something from downtown LA when we stop in LA." Santa Barbara is like an hour and a half north of Los Angeles, but like on a train I think it takes a little longer, and we had a 25-minute layover. And what he did is he called some Middle Eastern cab driver, and he told him that I needed to get something and that there'd be extra money involved if there weren't any questions asked. So I was wearing like a green Billabong hoodie at the time, and I remember I got off the train. This guy kept going to Orange County, but sure enough, the Middle Eastern cab driver, flagged me down, and he took me. LA is always changing right now. It's like 6th and San Pedro, 7th and San Julian, parts of Skid Row is where you can score. Back then it was 5th and Broadway. And as my career as a writer took off, I've done readings at the Last Bookstore, which is on 5th and Broadway, but that used to be the spot back then. I mean, these different areas in downtown LA will periodically get busted, and then that's it, like the location moves. But at that particular moment in LA time, that was the spot to score. So this guy ended up taking me to 5th and Broadway in the cab. Remember, this is way before Uber. We're like in a yellow cab, and he pulls up to the spot, and maybe 15 paisa Mexican guys surround his car. They know that I'm there to score, and I had like $200, so I got 2 packs of balloons. Each balloon has a .2, and I remember I was asking the cab driver if he knew where I could get needles, and he pointed to a hot dog stand. He's like, "Yeah, needles are $1 at this hot dog stand." So I ended up going to the hot dog stand, getting some needles. I think I had, whatever money I had, whatever loose dollars I had, I bought some needles. Cab driver ends up taking me back to the train station, and I get back on the train, and I start heading to Albuquerque. So, shooting heroin in the bathroom, and I end up going to the bar. Now, I remember it was right before I turned 21, and I couldn't legally drink yet, but some girl I was talking to before I left had given me a fifth of whiskey. So I basically was just pouring my own drinks out of my backpack and hanging out at the bar. And I ran into this girl, a good-looking girl, and I went up to her. I was kind of, I was drunk, and I went up to her and I was like, "Hey, I got a weird request for you." And she looked up at me, and I said, "I'm fighting with my girlfriend because I found out she's cheated on me, and I want to take a picture with you and I kissing, and then I want to send it to her." I had one of those little flip camera phones. I want to take a picture of us fake kissing, then I want to send it to her because I have a broken heart and I want to get back at her. And this girl starts giggling, and she's like, yeah, fuck it, let's do that. So we end up kissing. It was like a real kiss, though. When she ended up taking me back to her car, like, we had sex, and, you know, like, on the train, they have the little box cars that you can sleep in with a bed. So I ended up spending the night with her. I think she got off the next day in, like, Phoenix or wherever, I don't know, somewhere like that. So the next day, I found a couple that was, I mean, they were, like, sitting a few rows ahead of me. They were really sniffly, and I went up to them, and I was like, hey, are you guys all coked out? And they were really paranoid. They kind of looked at me, and I was like, can you give me a little bit? So they took me in the bathroom, and they're making lines on a book. But I took one of my needles out of my sock, and I started cooking heroin, and I added some of the coke that they gave me into it. And you could just tell they were, like, transfixed on the needle, and they were, like, mortified that they were in the bathroom with some guy that was shooting drugs. So I did a speedball, Belushi, and they ended up, like, getting away from me at some point. I think that, like, I did one shot of their coke, and they ended up going away, and I ended up coming down off the coke and drinking the rest of the whiskey, passing out. And so I finally wake up. I mean, I slept for like a whole day. I wake up and I'm in Albuquerque, and this girl, Liz, was at the train station to pick me up. She drove this little, like, yellow VW bug. She had her 6-month-old son with her. She sees me. I haven't showered for 2 days, drinking a fifth, been doing heroin the whole time. I did a little coke. Like, I look horrible. I probably smell horrible. And she sees me, and she's just like, Jesus Christ, you're in bad shape. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm coming here to get better. So she's like, all right, fair enough. She ends up taking me back to her place. In Albuquerque, compared to, like, California, the like, what you get for, I mean, I think she paid like $500 or $600 a month, and she had this just luxurious two bed, 2-bath condo. And sure enough, you know, her roommate was gone for the summer, so I had, like, my own room, and I'm there for maybe 10 minutes, and there's a knock on the door, and it's her boyfriend. Like, I was there, like, under false pretenses. Like, she basically sold me a dream that I was going out there to be with her. I'm like, what the fuck? And I still had a good amount of the heroin left. So for, like, the next couple days, I'm just, like, binging out in that room. I'm hearing this dude fuck this girl. It was just bizarre because, you know, I thought that I was going out there to be with her. And then I get there, and it turns out that she has a boyfriend, and he's pissed that he's like, what's this guy doing here? It was just a weird situation. And, like, the second night we're there, they get in a fight, and she ends up getting, like, a bottle of vodka, and she gets me some weed, and we're smoking weed, and we're watching movies, and she just looks at me, and she's like, will you kiss me? And I end up kissing her, and then we go into her room, and we have sex. And I remember, like, I was so strung out on heroin, I couldn't get it up, and I was probably, like, really unhygienic, and, you know, I don't usually have a problem getting it up, but I did that night, and it was just, like, super awkward, because I gave, like, a fucking subpar sexual performance, and that was the one, and I probably smelled like shit, too, just because I was so, you know, like, when you're addicted to heroin, you're literally, like, scared of water, you know? And so the next day it was awkward between us, like, and her boyfriend's still coming, and I'm just like, man, this is just a weird situation. They ended up breaking up, like, shortly after that, but her and I never hooked up again. Like, that was the one and only time, and I don't blame her. She was probably disgusted by me, and, you know. But anyway, so I start running out of heroin. I think my dad had sent the Suboxone at this point, so I went out one day, probably like it was probably night. I think it was like 5 or 6 at night, and I go out trying to score in the neighborhood, you know, just like walking up to people, hey, we're gonna get heroin. And this particular neighborhood was, like, not nice, but it wasn't bad. It was, like, kind of just somewhere in the middle. I mean, Albuquerque in general is pretty ghetto, you know. It's, like, not the nicest place, but this place was, I mean, it wasn't, like I said, it was in the middle. So I end up finding this, like, black chick. She's my age. And she's a prostitute. And she's pretty much telling me that there's no heroin there. There's just crack. And she's like, you know, if you because like at this point I had my dad wire me I think like $300 more, just telling him like I had to get on my feet there. I had to contribute to some of the groceries, but in my mind I just wanted to go score. And so I hang out with this like this chick, this black prostitute that's my age, pretty good looking, but you can tell she's been weathered by drug addiction. And I kind of start running around with her for like a couple days, and I like at that point I'm running out of heroin, and I'm looking everywhere. She's taking me to crack houses, and I can't find heroin anywhere. So now I'm out. I'm like totally out, and I'd been on like kind of like a little crack run, and I'd been drinking a lot of malt liquor, and I'm out. So Liz is working at a massage school, or she's going to massage school to become a massage therapist, and she asked me if I want to go to work with her, and I wanted to go just simply for the fact that I might be able to find like a worse neighborhood, and I might be able to score. So I end up going with her. I remember there were like 40 girls that worked there, or that were going to school there, and they were talking to me, and I was just so sick. I didn't want to talk to any of them, and I ended up leaving. I left my cell phone in her car. So I leave, and like I made mental notes while I was driving there. Like, okay, that area looks bad. I should probably try to check that one out. So I went back to that bad area, and I find like this tall black guy, and I explain my situation. I'm like, I'm from California, I'm dope sick, I can't find heroin, I can only find crack. And he's like, I got you. Well, I can definitely help you out. I was like, cool. So he ends up taking me to a crack house, and I find out he's like a bona fide fucking crackhead himself. Like, he like gets me to put up $50 to start smoking crack. And so now I'm smoking crack with him and all these like super ghetto weird people, and you know, just typical crackhead shit. And you know, he's like, come on, buy another rock, like I'm about to get money, and then like you get me and I'll get you, type of thing. So I end up spending like another $50. And sure, he did stick to what he said, and we ended up getting more crack that he paid for. He hustled up more money throughout the day, and it turned into nights. So now I've been, and like we're going to all these different like flop houses, all these trap houses, trying to find heroin, and we just can't do it. No, everywhere we go, it's just crack. I'm like, fuck. So I'm starting to get really paranoid, and I remember going with him to this dumpster. Like, we went to go take a blast behind this dumpster out of like a, you know, straight shooter crack pipe. And I remember taking a blast, and I just started like really wigging out. I'm like looking at him, I'm like, man, this guy is way bigger than me. Like, what if he gets all like cracked out and tries to rape me? I've never been raped in prison or in the free world. I have no idea where that kind of crack delusion came from, but I looked at him, and then I just took off running. He's like, hey, where the fuck you going? And I just ran. And I ran right into the heart of the ghetto. And now I'm asking, it's nighttime, I'm paranoid that this rapist dude's gonna find me or whatever. And I end up asking more people for heroin, can't find it, and I go to this AM/PM, or like a gas, something like comparable to that, some sort of gas station. And so in front of the gas station, there's this guy, and he's like a Native American guy, and he's standing there, and there's all these like gangbanging Mexican, like SA dudes. They have like rims and ripped out car stereos, and they're like standing in a line giving them to him. So obviously I know he's a connect. And I go up to him, and I say, hey, I'm looking for Chiva. You know, I'm from California, and I need some. And so he gets on his phone. He's like, let me call my partner. He gets on his phone. He goes, hey, we doing Chiva? And the guy's like, I guess says no. And he just looks at me. He's like, nah, we're just doing rocks right now. I'm like, fuck. So, you know, now I'm like, I'm hours and hours into withdrawal. Like, my nose is running. My pupils are big. Like, I'm puking up acidic bile and, you know, all the symptoms of being dope sick. And I end up going back into the ghetto, and now it's late. It's like, who knows, it's like 10 o'clock or something. I mean, it's been hours since I saw Liz. I don't have my cell phone. And I find this white guy, big old Peckerwood motherfucker, like, just got out of prison. He was telling me, he's like, I got gate money. When you get out of prison, they give you gate money, like in most state prisons. In the feds, they don't do that, but in the state, they do. So they gave him $200, and he's like, I'm just trying to smoke crack. I'm like, fuck, I need heroin. And he's like, I'm from Albuquerque. I know people that do it, but I literally just got off a bus and got dropped off in this neighborhood, and I'm just trying to take a blast of crack. I was like, all right. If I can get you crack, can you get me heroin? He's like, absolutely. So what ends up happening is I bring him back to the Native American guy. And the white guy's like, is that guy a cop? I'm like, nah. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah. He's like, all right. He gives me $60. He's like, go get a 60 rock from that guy. I said, okay. So I go up to him and I say, hey, can I get a 60 rock? And he looks at me and he sees the Peckerwood dude in the background. He goes, is it for you or is it for that guy? And I'm like, it's for that guy. He's like, well, I want to deal with him directly because if he wants more later, then you don't have to be in the middle. I just can deal directly with him. I said, okay, that sounds cool. So I bring the white dude up to him, introduce him. Dealer guy says, I don't have it on me. It's in my car. It's like a half a block, like it's around the corner. We just got to walk there. So the three of us start walking towards this dude. It's a truck, towards this guy's truck. And I stood like on the corner and I watched them walking up towards the truck. Now this is like a dark street and there's like one street light illuminating right where his truck is. So I see Peckerwood get in the passenger side and I see the Native American dealer getting in the driver's side. Right when he's getting in the driver's side, I see the Native American pull a badge from underneath his t-shirt, like on a chain. And I'm like, what the fuck? Now, I've been smoking crack all day, so I don't know if I'm tripping or if this is really happening. But as soon as they get in the car, all these spotlights go on the car. It was a sting. I felt so bad for this guy. I'm like, fuck, I got this dude set up. I didn't even mean to do it. I probably, I just shouldn't have vouched for the dude not knowing, but... at that point, you see all these cops running from different directions. They're in like tactical SWAT gear, and they see me and they shine a flashlight. Hey, get on the ground. I'm like, fuck. So I run and I get away from there, and I hopped over a couple fences and I got to like a 7-Eleven or something. I get to the 7-Eleven and there's like little magazine racks. So I crouch down and I'm like hiding, like the magazine racks are probably like right in the front of the 7-Eleven. So I'm like just kind of like pretending like I'm reading a magazine, but I'm tripping out. I'm thinking for sure I'm about to go to jail. And I see this like skater kid walk by and I'm like, hey, it's midnight now. And I see the kid and I'm like, hey, can I use your cell phone? I got to call this girl. Well, I didn't have her number. I didn't know it memorized. So like back then, a little trick I learned is I called my own voicemail, and she had left several messages. And if you press like pound when you're listening to messages, there's some option where you can get delivery receipts, and then it gives you the number of who left the message. So that's how I got her number. I ended up calling her. I'm like, Liz, I'm fucked. There's cops after me, and she's livid, like she brought me into her place to get sober, and I'm off just obviously using, and she has me hand the phone to the skater kid. He gives her directions, and she comes and picks me up, and she's screaming at me, like, rightfully so. She's like, you're a piece of shit, and came out here. I'm like, look, I came out here under the pretense that like we were gonna be boyfriend and girlfriend. I didn't know I was coming out here and had a fucking boyfriend. Like, I have to hear you get fucked by him all night, my first couple nights there or whatever. And so I kind of, was trying to turn it around on her. She was pissed. And it was like the first time she really told me, like, she started getting emotional, and so she started telling me the story about what happened with her kid's dad. And I guess he was like some bisexual, like, fucking emo kid or something, and he left her for another dude. And just like, I mean, I have a kid of my own now. I think anyone that leaves their kids is straight punk. Like, I could never do that to my kid. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work out with my girl. Like, I'll never not be in my kid's life. But this piece of shit just totally ran out on her. And so she, I was like, what do you want me to go beat him up? Now, I'm like 126. I'm at like 190 pounds now, you know, because I've been to prison so much. Now I've built myself up, and with calisthenics, just stays with you. But back then, I was probably like 126, 125 pounds, scrawny kid. But I still, I don't know, I just was pretty reckless back then, and I just didn't really give a fuck about anything. So I offered to go beat the guy up for her. And, you know, typical girl, no, I don't want you to do that. And then, of course, she's, like, giving me directions to his house and letting me use her car. So we get back to her house, I grab the car, and I grab a kitchen knife, like, not a butcher knife, but, like, a long kitchen knife that you'd see, like, maybe, like, in a horror movie. Like, you'd see, like, Michael Myers use one in, like, Halloween. And I grabbed one of those, and it had a little hole in its handle. So I got a shoestring, and I tied the string to the handle, and I put it into my pants. And she gave me directions. Back then, I think it was like MapQuest is how you got places. There weren't GPS like there are now. And I ended up going to his house, and I knocked on the door. I don't remember what his name is, but let's, for the sake of the story, let's call him Sam. I knock on the door, and, you know, some emo kids like answer. There's like 5 of them living at this house. They're all roommates. And as soon as they open the door, I pull the knife out. And I'm like, where the fuck is Sam? Like, just crazy. And they're looking at me with straight fear in their eyes. Like, they're the kind of kids that are just, you know, pussies. And they're like, I mean, come on. Some guy shows up with a kitchen knife and there's 5 of you. It's like, I'm not that much of a threat to anyone. But I guess I did some good acting because they were petrified. But probably brandishing the knife helped too. And they're like, Sam's not here, whatever the fuck his name was. Sam's not here. And I'm like, oh, let me write a note for him. I literally like went in the house and wrote a note saying, if you don't get back in your kid's life, next time I'm gonna murder you. And I got the knife and I stabbed it into like a dartboard that they had like in their living room. You know, a classic like college kid living room. Budweiser signs flickering and posters of naked girls, and then they had this dartboard, and I stabbed the note on there, and I left, and they're just kind of like looking at me like, wow, that was, you know, just some little junkie guy comes in there and created all that drama. And so I go back to her apartment, and, you know, I still didn't score, so I'm fucking sick, and my dad, for, like, I either had the Suboxone, maybe it was Sen, or maybe I didn't, I don't really remember, but for whatever reason, like, I needed the heroin. So I go through another night of withdrawal, and when you're kicking heroin, like, you just cannot sleep. A lot of, like, nowadays, I'm seeing that a lot of kids are mixing crystal meth with their heroin habit, so they'll stay up and be so overstimulated on the meth the whole time they're on heroin. When they kick, they literally, like, can sleep it off because their body's so deprived. But when you, like, I didn't have a meth habit, it was just straight heroin. So, like, I was electrified by the withdrawal and just up all night, pacing, feeling horrible. It was like one of those really long nights that I was just praying that the morning would come quicker so that I'd have access to people again. And when the sun finally did come up, I went out into the parking lot and I saw this black guy wearing sunglasses. And my junkie tuition just went off right away. Like, all right, sun's barely up. Skinny black guy has sunglasses on. He looks like a dope fiend. I go up to him and I'm like, I said, hey, I'm from California and I'm trying to find a methadone clinic. And he's like, shit, I'm going to the methadone clinic right now. He's like, you sick? I was like, yeah. I was like, you got anything on you? He's like, no, but I can get some really good heroin. I said, great. He's like, you got money? And I had like, he's like, I'm like, how much is it? He's like, $60. Give me the money and I'll come back at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and give you the dope. And I'm just like, there's no way I'm giving you money, man, without you giving me anything. He's like, you see that I'm parked in my assigned parking spot at this complex. Like, I fucking live here. If you want it, give me the money and I'll come back. And I was so desperate that I gave him the money. He also gave me a box of syringes that he had in his trunk. He's like, here, you can have some syringes in case you come up on anything. I was like, all right, cool. So I went back to her apartment, and I had a little bit of money left, so I went out to try to look for something again. This time I find a homeless guy, and he's in a wheelchair, and I ask him if he has anything, and he's like, I have pills. I'm like, what kind of pills do you have? He said, I have 80 milligram Oxycontins, 2 milligrams Annex bars, and I think he had K4 Dilaudid too. I gave him $20, 40, whatever I gave him, it was a small amount of money. He gave me a handful of these drugs. I don't think he knew what they were worth. Classic, like, homeless guy that just probably came up on some pills and just had no idea how much oxys are worth or how much any of this stuff, Dilaudids even. So I went back to her place, and I shot up a couple Oxy 80s, and I got well. I took, I think, 3 Xanax, and I don't take Xanax that often because it doesn't agree with me. I don't know, it doesn't, I've never really liked it. I don't like the way they make me feel. And then I did some Dilaudid, so I'm, as the Xanax is kind of rolling and creeping up on me, I'm shooting Dilaudids and, getting that pins and needle rushes, and I forget about the black guy. And at about 1 o'clock, he shows up. There's a knock on the door. He comes in, and he's asking me if I'm high. And, I'm all Xanaxed out now, and I've been I'm well. So I'm not sick, and I don't need it like I did. But I get it from him, and I go to cook up a shot, and I go to try to shoot it up, and I'm so high that I just miss, like, my arm, I go to hit my arm, and I just miss my arm, because I have, like, no equilibrium, because I'm so high. And he's like, you look really fucked up, I don't think you should do that right now. And so I ask him to hit me, because I am so high. He goes to hit me, and that's all I remember. I wake up in an elevator. I have no idea how I got there, and I have a syringe sticking in my arm, it looked like a steroid needle, like a big barrel, huge long needle, and it was just sticking in my arm. And he wasn't there, and I was like, what the fuck? I had no idea what happened, and I'm still feeling super groggy, and I feel dope sick. I take the needle out. I look at it, it's Narcan. It's like a single serving of Narcan. And I was like, what the fuck? I get out of the elevator, and I see him, and he's on my cell phone calling my best friend, the same guy that was delivering me the heroin on the train that I missed. And I walk up as he's telling him that I OD'd, and then he gave me a Narcan shot, and it didn't work. And then he thought I died, and he left me in the elevator. And I was like, no, I'm alive. And so what he told me is in Albuquerque, remember this is like 05, 04, something like that. I don't know if they still do this in Albuquerque, but back then, and they didn't do this in California, needle exchanges, but in Albuquerque they did for some reason. They give you Narcan, like these little single serving Narcan shots that you keep in your freezer in case anybody goes out. And Narcan is like naloxone, it's an opiate antagonist. So when you shoot up Narcan, like in Pulp Fiction, they stick an adrenaline shot in her heart. That's complete bullshit. That's not what they do in real life. In real life, they give you Narcan shots, and what happens is when you go through an opiate overdose, you go into respiratory arrest. Your breathing gets shallow. That's why if you see somebody go out on heroin, you should always put ice cubes up their ass, or shoot them up with salt water, or shoot them up with salt, shoot them up with coke or meth if you have it. You got to do that IV though, because you can't do it intramuscular with meth and coke, but it'll bring somebody back. But Narcan is even better than all that, because it literally takes the opioid out of your receptor, and it'll take you out of the respiratory arrest. And that's why there's such a big thing right now about why Narcan should be legal. And it saved my life right then. And what had happened is I OD'd in the apartment. He dragged me from the apartment into the elevator. He went up to his apartment, and he had one of those shots in his freezer. Then he went back in the elevator, and he shot me up, but I didn't come back too instantly. I just came back, I don't know, maybe like 5 minutes after that. So he told me, like he's not going to serve me anymore. That's it. Shortly thereafter, I had met some gangbanger Hispanic dude, and he's like, just another thing where I was walking around the complex looking for drugs, and I happened to run into this guy. So he starts serving me. My dad's sending me money, but he's like, you know, he's just not really feeling it anymore. I'm pretty much, like, that was around the time right before he kind of just cut me off. Like, I think within the next few months, that was it. Like, he was just sick of my shit, and he stopped enabling me, and that's when I started selling drugs, and eventually I got busted by the feds for it. But back then, he would give me little rations of money. So I'm staying in the room by myself. I'm not really hanging out with Liz that much. I remember we went to a 4th of July barbecue, and I took acid. She took me up to the hot springs one time, and we went skinny dipping, but we didn't hook up or anything. And I mean, it was pretty uneventful. I was just like kind of living in that room, shooting heroin, watching like Janis Joplin documentary. That was like the only thing she had on VHS in that room. I watched it over and over again. And so eventually what ends up happening out there is one of her friends sold weed. It was a girl that like I'd met a couple times, and Liz knew that I was doing heroin in that room, and she knew that I was hanging out with like, you know, unsavory drug dealers. And so she asked me if I could hook her up with a pound. And I want to say the pound was like $3,500. So I called my heroin dealer and I asked him, I'm like, hey, can you get a pound of weed for this girl I know? And yeah, I want to say it was 35 or so. Whatever it was, I was going to make $500 off it. Maybe it was $3,000, 3,500, and I was going to get it for 3 or 2,500, something like that. So he agreed to go meet her and do the transaction. Then he told me that he was going to give me whatever my cut was in heroin. I was like, perfect. So I'm just kind of like sitting in the room, and Liz comes in crying. She's like, you're a piece of shit. And I'm like, why? What's up? And she's like, he robbed my friend at gunpoint. I'm like, are you serious? I guess he had robbed her, and he never told me he was gonna. I knew nothing about that. Like, she thought that I set it all up, and she's like, you're a piece of shit, selfish junk. You have a 6-month-old kid here. How could you do this? You know, all true, but you shouldn't have brought me in your house in this condition. Like, I was super honest with her before I got out there. I'm like, look, I'm like stealing money from people. I'm being shady. Like, I'm doing what I have to do to survive right now. And she's like, you gotta go. You gotta get the fuck out. And she bought me a train ticket back to Santa Barbara. So I remember, and I regret this to this day. Just a piece of shit thing I did, but right before I left, I stole a bunch of shit from her, put it in my bag. She did nothing but try to help me, and that just shows like where my moral compass was at that time. It's just all about me. My soul was just ravaged from heroin addiction. So she puts me on the train. Like, I mean, we don't even talk on the car ride to the train station. She doesn't know I stole a bunch of shit from her, but just from the first night I was there to that, I had brought nothing but problems there. And so she drops me off at the train station. I get on the train. I'm defeated. My dad's pissed that I'm coming back. I was probably there for like a month or two. And I'm on the train, and just icing on the cake on the way home to Santa Barbara, I met these kids. They were probably like 18 or 19, and they were from the East Coast. And they told me that they had saved up a bunch of money when they were working in high school, because they wanted to travel across the United States, and like they were biking, and then they'd like take trains to certain places, and they were going from like Utah to LA or something, and they had to stop through Santa Barbara, and we started talking, and they're asking me about acid. You know, can you get acid? I'm like, yeah. And so I get on my cell phone, and I remember I called myself, like I called my own number, and I had a fake conversation with myself. And I get off the phone, and I'm like, yeah, I talked to my friend. He can meet me at the train station. $600 for a vial. And they wanted it. I mean, they had a bunch of money, and they're like, yeah, we wanna buy a vial and just have a bunch of acid for a trip. It sounds awesome. I said, great. When we get there, I'll get it for you. So I ended up going in the bathroom by myself, and I called my other friend, and I said, hey, I'm gonna jack these kids right now. I need you to come pick me up. So we get to the train station. I'm like, hey, I'm just going to go around the block with this guy. So he picks me up. He takes me to a liquor store. I buy one of those little, like, breath drop vials. They're, like, that big that real LSD comes in. But what I did is he had a water bottle in his car, and I kind of cleaned some of the breath dropper out with it so that it was just kind of light blue and translucent. So it looked like it could be something, I guess. And then I put it in cellophane, and I did that little, the little lighter trick where I lit it and kind of pinched it together. And it looked like I think I put some tape around it. It really looked like it was drugs, but it wasn't. And I brought it to them, and they gave me $600, and I burned them for $600. That's another thing I regret. I mean, I definitely don't advocate going around stealing from people, but that's just, that's what I was doing back then, just to try to survive my habit. So that was my experience in Albuquerque. I have other stories that I'll post soon, kind of just getting ready for the documentary, but I got a lot of stories like that, and if there's interest, I definitely appreciate you watching. Have a good day.